Before we introduce Ray, let's take a moment for prayer. I'd like to do is, for me, Thanksgiving, not a high festival of the church, but one of my favorite holidays. It's all about family and friends and good food. So I thought for our prayer tonight, I would read the lyrics from an old, old hymn, Come Ye Thankful People Come, written way back in 1844. But it's a hymn I sang as a child into the youth, into my adulthood. So it's part of my Thanksgiving memories. Let us pray. Come, ye thankful people, come. Raise the song of harvest home. All is safely gathered in ere the winter storms begin. God our Maker doth provide for our wants to be supplied. Come to God's own temple, come. Raise the song of harvest home. It's that prayer of harvest home that we begin tonight. Ray Gaesser, you're from Corning, Iowa. For those who are not familiar with the state of Iowa, where are you located?
So our farm is in southwest Iowa, and we're about 30 miles from the Missouri line, and we're about 65 miles from Nebraska, along U.S. Highway 34. We just farm very close there. So.
All right. And Ray, I noticed I was doing a little poking around preparing for tonight, and I tell people that if you want to know who Ray Gaesser is, Google him because you'll see a long list of articles that you've been written about you and videos. But a couple of things that I was very excited about, and that was that you were featured with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service stories. In fact, you had two of those featuring your work here in Iowa. And what I'm excited was the title. It's not oftentimes you see government agencies begin with the word faith. And both of these were called Faith, Responsibility, Motivate Longtime Iowa No-Tiller. So there they are. Thank you, Lindsay. Lindsay is our wonderful communication team member who's running tech tonight, and she makes us look so good. But this is what's available, and there's a QR code if you want to take your phone out to take a photo and download that. You'll see, again, the full story of some of the work that Ray is doing, and it's being recognized all over the country. So Ray, is so good to have you here. One of the things is I noticed also is that you have had a very long legacy of serving and service and leadership. In fact, your resume is rather robust. So what are some of the organizations that you have served in the past years?
Oh boy, from the beginning, I was became involved locally with our economic development group, and then we started our Adams County agriculture group through them, and from there went to became a director for the Iowa Soybean Checkoff, and then the Iowa Soybean Association, and became the leader of both of those, and moved on to the American Soybean Association, and was president and chairman of the board also there. Lately, it's some international focus with solutions from the land. We do a lot of work on conservation, and I want to talk about the Circle of Life message that we developed and the Iowa Smart Ag message that we developed through solutions from the land, and also I've been to 5 COPs. I did not go to COP 29.
Oh, really?
But I'm 19 through 23 involved in the COP and represented solutions from the land and U.S. agriculture, and shared our message of circularity and agriculture is a solution to climate change and not the problem that some folks would like to paint us in.
So, Ray, for those who aren't familiar, what is COP?
COP is the Conference of Parties, and it's really about the discussions on climate change, and climate issues, and how countries can come together and hopefully work together to mitigate some of the issues that are going on, and to do a better job of channeling the resources and enhancing the resources that they all have and protecting them. at the same time. So that's been our message. That's the goal of COP in the long, and it's hard to get 100 in some countries together in an agreement, but they actually did put an agreement together at the Paris Agreement, and again 2 years ago in Egypt. So it's come along, but it's a slow process.
Well, I'm just impressed with your international involvement in the whole issue of how agriculture is a solution to some of our climate challenges. Lindsay, did you have a chance? Did you find that picture for Ray?
Yeah. So that's the picture I wanted to share, and it's our example of the circle of life on our farm. We don't have animals and we don't have livestock, but our neighbors do. And every acre that we farm, we have a cover crop on it. So we allow maybe 6 of our neighbors' herds now it was 5 at that time, to graze our cover crops and to be on there in the early and midwinter to utilize that. And it improves our soil health. And at the same time, it saves our neighbors with cattle, from buying so much hay. 2 years ago, I know we saved them 300 big bales of hay, and that's about $30,000 worth. But the photo is the cattle grazing on our cover crops, the corn stalks that are there, the wind energy in the background, and if you could see the ethanol plant 14 miles away, all of our corn goes to the ethanol plant to create more environmentally engine fuel, liquid fuel for all of our engines. And the DDGs, which is all the protein that was in that corn is still left over. And that protein goes to feed the animals in our area. We work with our neighbors that have the animals to get the animal waste they put back on our soil to grow the next crop of corn. And we all need to think more circularly. And how can we, whether we have livestock on our farm or not, but how can we work with our neighbors then who might have livestock to build that circle of life on everyone's farm? And we think it's one of the answers, and one of our responsibilities. We've been blessed to be farmers, and we've been blessed to care for the land, and we have a responsibility to innovate, to try new things, to work with our neighbors to make all those good things happen the way they should.
Yeah, I think the whole circle of life that your organization has been emphasizing is remarkable. And there's so many lessons there. And congratulations and thank you for doing that work. You must be pulling out one of your booklets there.
Yeah, I'm trying to find one, but here's the one we did on for the international group. The report. If you go to solutionsfromtheland.org, you can find the Renaissance report, and you can find the Iowa Smart Ag report on there. And we work with a lot of people to develop those and messages. And there's about 30 of us throughout all of Iowa that helped build that report and shared what they do on their farm to make themselves more circular.
Now, those who are listening tonight, I think you're going to have a lot of Ray's going to inspire and trigger lots of questions. So I'm going to encourage you to use the Q&A link on the webinar and type your questions in, and we'll be sure we get to every question before we end our time together. So again, write your questions in Q&A, and don't be afraid to. Ray is transparent. He'll answer your questions, and I will read those questions and we begin to collect those. But let's go back to the growing year. So grains in the bin, machinery's put away. What kind of growing year did you have?
Well, it started out very dry, and we waited to plant our corn to our normal time, which was around the 20th of April is usually when we start, hopefully to start planting corn, and soybeans shortly thereafter. about the time we got done planting corn, it started raining almost every other day, and we averaged 2.5 inches a week every week for 5 weeks during the month. We planted in dry conditions, and it ended up being too wet in some of our spots, so we had some drowned outs in our corn. Our soybeans came through pretty well, and we had a nice stand of those in most cases. So our corn yields ended up being about average. Our soybeans were average to slightly above, so it turned out okay. It was very wet in May, good moisture in June. July became drier, and August became very dry until the end of August. And we got a nice rain to help the soybeans out about the 28th of August. We're blessed for that. Started harvesting corn about September 15th, and hardly stopped until we were all done with corn and soybeans both, because it just didn't rain. It was warmer than normal and dusty, and about the time a week after we got done harvesting, it started raining, and it's been wet ever since again. So it's that variability. And I like to share with folks that don't farm, every year is different, and some years are good all the way through, and some years, it's a struggle. But we don't live in a controlled environment. And that's a message we like to share with our legislators and those who try to make decisions for farmers, that when they haven't lived that life, so.
And with that a little bit, you've been doing no-till and cover crops for a number of years. Do you think that the way you manage the soil, and have been, 25 years you've been doing this, do you think that helped to mitigate some of the damage to the crop this year when it was wet in the early part of the year and dried out at the end?
Yeah.
Do you think it helped?
It really does. We've been no-tilling 100% since 1991. And we started growing cover crops in 2010. We don't do anything. We always test something for a little while to make sure it's going to work for us, and find ways to make it work. And so we had a couple hundred acres then, and every year we doubled our acres or more. And by 2 years ago, we are now 100% cover crops on every acre that we grow. We really think it protects the soil. It allows our soil to absorb those intense rains much better. The example that on the NRCS report, that you saw with USDA, they came to our farm in 2020, I believe in 21, something like that. On where I live, we had been no-till for 30 years at the time, and cover crops for 10 years at the time. They tested our water infiltration, and this was in April, and we could absorb an inch of water in 2 or 3 seconds. 2 or 3 seconds. The normal is 30 minutes. And in a neighboring farm just a half a mile away that we had just started renting at the time that had a history of tillage, it took 7 to 8 minutes to absorb that 1 inch of water, or 2 or 3 seconds on our farm. So that soil health, the structure of our soil, all the earthworms that work in there allow us to take those intense rains and absorb them into the soil rather than have them run off and erode and fill up the streams. So we really believe in it. We've seen great results, and it hasn't. It was a learning process, and it is for everyone. But farmers learn from other farmers, so we do the best we can to have a field day or two here, and to work with NRCS and work with our Soybean Association and Practical Farmers of Iowa. And it's mostly our son and daughter-in-law, by the way. We didn't talk about that. So I'm kind of retired, and I like to say I'm irresponsible. But but I'm still here doing a lot of things that I love to do.
Oh, a question just came up, Ray. The question is, what do you use for cover crops?
We use cereal rye on most everything. We harvest about 300 acres of rye a year now. About 100 of those acres go to a local distillery to make rye whiskey. About 80 of those acres we use on our own for our own cover crop seed. And then we sell the balance to neighbors and folks around, in a 50 or so mile radius. So it's a value added opportunity for us. And, it's really an opportunity for the next generation to find another niche that they can do and grow besides soybeans and corn that is so highly competitive anymore.
So there's a lot of talk also, it's for so long, it's been about bushels per acre, producing the most bushels per acre. As I've attended some soil health conferences, I'm seeing a shift from yield or bushels per acre to profitability per acre. Are you seeing that same shift?
Yeah, my son and daughter-in-law, that's their focus, and it was mine too. We never went overboard on fertilizer, but we wanted to be adequate, and we learn as we go on what's adequate, and we've learned that adequate is much less than we thought was adequate. 10
Oh, really? Okay.
Particularly per bushel of yield, because our technology is so better in our seeds, because our equipment is so much better, because their soil is healthier too. Things we're using about a third less fertilizer, growing a third more yield than we did 20 years ago.
Interesting. Have you seen your fuel costs go down as well?
Oh yes. When we used to till everything, we were using 7 or 8 gallons of fuel per acre. Today we use about 3.2 to 3.5 gallons of fuel per acre. So that is a big deal, and it's one of the things that caused us to really focus strongly in the 1980s when things were really bad. How do we cut costs? And we eliminate a lot of equipment and labor and time and fuel, over a 3 or 4 year period when we went to 100% no-till.
So you talked about challenges, and there was another question. Let me check questions here. So some of these will fit very nicely in the questions. So another question regarding covers, Ray. After you harvest the rye, you come back with other covers.
Yes, we do. Yeah, and it's a mix. It's a grazing mix that we allow our neighbors to graze in. It's probably eight or maybe 10 different species. It'll be a brassica, it'll be some kind of legume, it'll be a grass of some kind or two. It might be sun hemp, added in. Just several things that allow us to have our neighbors come and benefit from it, but at the same time, that mixture builds the soil health even better than a single species would. And it's right across from my house today, and we've got kale out there, and we've got mustard out there, and we've got winter peas out there, and sorghum, Sudan grass, several different things. It's lovely, and we didn't graze it because my pond is out in the middle, and I don't want cows out there. But
okay.
Well, you see all the pheasants that are in today.
and there is an advantage having that diversity of plants, is it not? Does it not increase the diversity of soil organisms? Is that my understanding?
Yeah, we're really building soil structure and soil health and resilience. able, with that kind of a mix, able to use a little less fertilizer too.
Okay, so decreasing input costs. How do you plant these covers? Now, you and I have had a conversation about this, but why don't you explain kind of what is the routine for getting the covers planted?
So anything after rye harvest that we plant the 1st of August, it gets drilled in because there's some of it's very small seed and it's a mix. We drill it. Anything that we're going to harvest for seed, we drill in 10-inch rows. But everything else, all the other 4,000 acres gets just spread. And we've learned that it works for us. We follow the combine with a spreader that we spread the rye out there at about 1 bushel an acre. And you should see it today. It is lovely.
Okay.
And looks really good. It rained on it, and it's all coming up. And in our fields, we have a 100-foot sprayer. So our sprayer width is 100 feet, and we've learned that we can pretty well spread rye and maybe a mix of either wheat or triticale in there at 100 feet. It's not perfect, but it's a pretty good job. And we go in and follow the sprayer tracks when the soybeans are dropping leaves and have that seed underneath the leaves when they fall to protect the seed and keep the moisture there. And, it's worked, let me see, this is about our 5th year doing that. And that's how we're able to cover that many acres in a short period of time and have an adequate stand. We don't want a stand that makes a sod. We want a half a stand out there, something that protects the soil and has the roots and encourages the earthworms and all the other organisms that work into the soil. But we don't want a sod out there because we think it causes us problems at planting time anyway.
So a follow-up question with that, with your cover crops. First of all, are you using GMO seed for corn and soybeans? What about pesticides, and are you using glyphosate?
Oh, yes, there's glyphosate on most every acre. I've used it my whole life. I've seen there is only one test in the world, and it was done in Europe about 20 years ago now, that said glyphosate may be a carcinogen. All the other tests have said not likely. So I'm concerned about folks that want to take that off the market because it allows us to do the no-till and allows us to keep the weeds down and for a minimum amount of cost and I think a minimal, much less damage to the environment than if we tilled, much less. So there's
because the half-life of glyphosate is fairly short.
Yeah, it's very short. Yes.
So it doesn't stay in the environment very long. What about GMOs? That's always a question, always a little bit of controversy. I think you're using GMOs, I'm assuming. Why?
Well, we use GMOs because it has allowed our seed companies to advance much better genetics in a much shorter period of time. The next stage of manipulating the seed is much safer than the old way they used to do it, and it allows much quicker evolution of our seeds and much better yield and much better tolerance to herbicides and those kind of things that we use to keep the weeds down and get that crop ready.
Certainly efficiency of water.
Yeah.
Ray, you and I are contemporaries. I remember growing up on a farm in Minnesota. I mean, if you got 80 to 100 bushels an acre of corn, that was a banner year. You celebrated that. Now, 200 has become the norm. So in a very short period of time, there's been that much change. And I think a lot of our dry years, I think yields have been good because the crop is able to, it has resistance to drought.
Yeah, Absolutely. It's has that resistance, but it's also the way we farm today. We're not drying the ground out when we're doing tillage, going out there and planting. And we have a residue on top of the soil from the previous year's crop and the cover crops that we plant that keeps the temperature cooler in that soil too.
So another kind of a final question also has been posted. You talked a bit about the use of fertilizer, chemicals, and pesticides. You said fertilizer rates are down. And also, are you finding with cover crops you're having weed suppression, so less need for high rates of herbicides?
Yes, we are, and we've run strict comparisons and side by sides for since 2014, I think, and we're seeing some really great benefits from having rye as a cover crop to suppress, particularly water hemp, which is it's really pigweed, you used to call it, but now it's water hemp because it's adapted too, and Mother Nature adapts all the time too.
Finds a way.
Try to work with her on those adaptations, but it's cereal rye really does a great job of suppressing it, and it eliminates. When we have cereal rye out there, it eliminates usually one herbicide application in season for us, and that completely offsets the cost that we have to grow that cereal rye. So
that's a great point. That's a great point.
Nice offset, not in addition to the soil saving and the water wicking and all those other good things. So.
Also, with the use of no-till, would I say you have less of that seed bank floating to the top because you're not tilling?
Yes, absolutely. We're not warming the soil up so quickly, and we're not bringing up that seed bank, as you mentioned, that's been plowed under for a long, long time, and we just see so many benefits, from no-till, from cover crops, from, our system we use. I think we need to talk about a little bit about some of the opportunities out there too, Tim, in some of the federal programs for carbon, and the way we farm today, you had Mitch Hoare on a month or so ago. We farm today utilizes almost all the advantages of the carbon score. So the average carbon score in the United States is about a plus 23. I don't know where they get 23 at. But the way we farm today with no-till, with cover crops, with animal manure, with site-specific agriculture, with the exact apply that we use, all those things, the score in our farm is a minus 10.9 or better. And so the total value to an ethanol plant is nearly $4 a bushel more than the value of the regular value on the Chicago Board of Trade today. So right now our ethanol plant's paying just over $4. And the corn that we send over there, if they utilize the 45Z, all the carbon credits, is about $8 a bushel. So it helps the environment, it helps the ethanol, it helps the farmers. We hope that farmers will get a % of that extra value there, and it's so many. It's just an example of what we were advocating for with Solutions from the Land since 2015. It's about incentives versus regulation to get something done, and it's we hope it will come to fruition here. We don't know for sure. Yeah.
Some unknowns right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are, from the standpoint of someone who's been at this a long time, you are seeing opportunities for additional revenue to be generated by the farm by using no-till and cover crops.
Yeah. Absolutely. we're seeing that no matter what, even today, with allowing our neighbors to graze and being able to utilize some of those benefits. We don't charge them very much, but we see a big advantage to it for them and us, and it's great for our farm, but it's also great for our neighborhood.
So one of the things is you said farmers learn from farmers, and you host some field days. So one of the questions was, how many of your neighbors are also adopting similar regenerative or soil health practices?
Yeah, more and more all the times. We were, if not the first, very near the first in the 1980s to no-till. And around here, in the last 20 years, we're more than 90% of the land around here is no-till. So that's one of the examples. Cover crops is a little bit slower to be accepted, but every year there's one or two more neighbors in a 10-mile radius that want to talk about it and want to try a little bit. And that's how you move forward. We don't encourage anyone to jump in and do their whole farm on a new practice. We encourage them to practice, test it for a year or two, but give it a fair test. And Chris says when people come to him, our son Chris, and say, well, I tried it and it just didn't work. Well, did you try it 1 year and take the incentive money and they say, well, it didn't work for me, or did you really get a fair test? And in our area of the state, you can make cover crops work on every acre if you want them to. Be a little innovative. Ways to save time and energy when you do it.
Right. Now I know that you get that initial kind of preservation of soil. You don't have a wind erosion, water erosion because of it. But there are some reports sometimes of in that year, 2, 3, 4, 5, some yield drag. Is that something that people experience?
I think we maybe have a little yield drag in corn, maybe 3 to 8 bushels an acre, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. But we get at least that much yield improvement with our soybeans. So it's we're actually gaining, because soybean value is more than corn,
Okay.
When we compare to our neighbors who I trust to tell me their yields, we're very corn, maybe slightly under, but our beans, last 3 years now, we've beat all of our neighbors by 5 to 10 bushels an acre.
That's substantial.
That's substantial.
Wow, that is substantial.
And that's making them start to think, well, maybe on our corn stalks we should be planting, and not do it on the land that's going to corn yet till they
right.
get more comfortable. But yeah.
Well, in this age where profitability is so razor thin in farming right now, it just seems that every dime, dollar, $10 bill you can save per acre it's more money, more revenue that can be used then for capitalization and for future and so on.
Well, and in most cases, in Iowa at least, there's enough incentives the first year or two, if you're careful about it, to cover your costs on cover. And in the Iowa nutrient reduction strategy that we agreed to back in 2013, I think it was, that we sometime in the future, wasn't the date set, that we would have half of our land in cover crops every year.
Okay.
And so in 23, we were at 3.8 million acres. So that's about 17 or 18% of our land. We went from 10,000 acres around 15 years ago to 3.8 million. So it's coming along. And, and people are seeing the value, and it's allowing our next generations to, if they want to start a business, in cover crops and seeding cover crops and those things, it's another opportunity to keep that next generation on the farm, I think, too.
Do you see any other innovations in the cover crops being planted in the future? I know you're doing cereal rye primarily, and you're doing a grazing mix after harvesting your cereal rye. Are there some kind of new ideas and things on the horizon that you can incorporate?
Well, we're actually partnered with Iowa State University and Corteva and Iowa Soybean Association on a small plot, 2 acres of permanent cover crops. It's bluegrass, and it's old varieties of bluegrass that kind of go dormant in the summer because they don't stand the heat. We keep testing it, and it's a work in progress, I would have to say.
Okay.
Missed the yearly meeting this year, and it was down. They also partner with the University of Missouri, so it was down in Columbia, Missouri, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and I couldn't make it. I had some other commitments, but they keep working at it, and they keep improving the process, and they keep trying new things, and that's what we do in agriculture, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that folks don't always realize is that not all, but a good portion of farmers are innovators. You're always looking for that next edge, that next way to reduce cost, increase output, improve machinery efficiencies, because that all deals with the profitability. Again, as I mentioned before, is that it's pretty razor thin these days between making a little money and not making any money.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
So as you think about you're supposedly retired. So as you look down the road and you look at your son, Chris,
mm-hmm.
What do you see happening for him as a farmer in Iowa in the next 10 to 15 years? Do you have your crystal ball out that you could help us look down the road a bit?
So, I mean, they are innovators, and Chris loves to test new things, So that's one of I think our next generation on our farm will be very much on top of anything that's new, And, working with, he works with Iowa State University, Iowa Soybeans, a couple of the big, seed companies to test new seeds, but also to test new other technologies too. And I think if the next generation is open-minded and not closed-minded about possibilities and willing to look at those things, they're going to be successful. And if they decide that they can keep doing the things the same way Dad did, I think they're going to struggle, because we have to keep innovating in order to be successful, competitive, I think.
Ray, there's a question. I think it's a very good question. As I relayed the title of that NRCS articles, I began with the word faith.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk a bit about your faith and how that guides you and drives you as you make decisions about your farm?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always grown up in a family of faith, and actually went to a grade school in Indiana that was taught by nuns, and it was a public school. How would you like to do that today?
Okay.
But I've always felt that, it was a blessing to be able to be a farmer. It's a blessing to be able to care for the land, and a responsibility at the same time, not only to care for the land, but for our families and our communities. And it all fits together, and it's part of that circle of life that I see every day, and that people in the city don't see, I think that's maybe one of the differences that we see, because those of us that get to farm, we get to see God's creation every day. And it's not the same every day, but you watch the sun come up, you watch it rain, you watch your crops grow, you watch your animals grow, you watch your family grow. All those things you get to see from a perspective of, this is what God has done for us. And in the city, in the streets and the big buildings, and and all the businesses there, and all they see is what humans have made. And I think that's part of the difference.
Mm.
I really do.
Hmm.
And it certainly is for me anyway.
Ray, are there any books that you have read or do read that really help to speak to you through all of this?
Oh boy. I don't read all that many, but I've got a few on my desk here. Well,
Okay.
Leopold, Resilient Agriculture, Weather and Bible Prophecy. There's two of them right there, but the Leopold books I've read. There's one right there.
All the people. Yep. He was very, very much a faithful guy. Any Wendell Berry books there? Have you read Wendell Berry?
Fun. Yeah.
Okay.
It's been a while. But, Silent Spring is one, and I don't agree with everything, but it opens your mind up.
Okay. That's refreshing because I think it could, that book, Silent Spring, was written in the 60s, wasn't it? I mean, that had to startle folks a little bit. And there had to be some pushback to that if you were a farmer, because that was, we were in that age of chemicals, and the more you used, the better it was. And that was saying, maybe we need to rethink that.
Yeah. And then, back in that time, it was about chemistry circumventing Mother Nature. Mm-hmm. And today, I hope we've changed that thought to innovating and adapting and using that technology to work with Mother Nature instead of against her.
I think that's a great point, Ray, because back when I was at the University of Minnesota, I took a soil science class. It was all about the chemistry of soil. We didn't talk about biology at all. The shift to saying the soil is not just an empty vessel that you pour inputs into, but rather it's a living organism. It's a living part of God's creation. And how do we nurture that? I find that very refreshing and very exciting.
Absolutely. Yep. And it is changing. And I think our whole mindset, not only in the universities, but in the industry, it's changing to more of a look at how do we work with Mother Nature, and how do we create adaptations and advantages when we think more, more globally, within our business and within our farm and within our soil, that we think more in that circle of how it all works together and can one action benefit another. And one of the words that we like to use is, one organism's waste is another organism's sustenance.
Good point.
Nature works, by the way.
Yeah, part of God's creative genius. We begin to see that working. It always excites me. And I like little dirt under my fingernails. I love that unexpectedness of life that comes. Ray, I know that you've taken advantage of some of the NRCS or Natural Resources Conservation Service programs. What kind of programs have you been using?
Well, first off, I didn't take any because I was involved early on in the policy, and I thought I had an unfair advantage, But after it was, established for a few years, we started working with the state of Iowa, the Department of Agriculture, to get $5 an acre off of our crop insurance premium because of the cover crops we grew. Chris found a program that works really well for us as we add another species to our cover crops that we grow. We have a 5-year contract on 500 acres that's paying us $51 an acre from the NRCS.
Okay.
And that's a big deal.
It is. And of course, that's a part of the USDA. So just in case people aren't,
It's actually an EQIP program.
EQIP, okay.
We have a limited amount of money. And so it may take a while if you apply to, it may take more than a year or two to get in line as the money comes in, to do that. And by the way, I've had the privilege, and I still am, an advisor for G.T. Thompson, who is chairman of the House Ag Committee. And I've shared with him some of the benefits of those incentives, for agriculture that are in place because of, the IRA funding and the, Inflation Reduction Act funding. And he sees that, but they would like to have it more under the guise of USDA versus an independent agency sharing that money. And so, I think we can, and hope that we can keep that money invested in practices and adaptations that benefit the soil and clean the water and protect the soil and feed everyone at the same time.
Well, the NRCS is certainly a key part of the conservation title of the Farm Bill, which is still has not been quite achieved yet. So a question I have is, can you tell us about how NRCS fits into the Farm Bill and maybe what the status of the Farm Bill is right now?
Yeah, I just happen to have a list of how a Farm Bill.
Okay.
Because I use it every once in a while. The new Farm Bill is based over 10 years. It's a 5-year Farm Bill, but the budget is based on the next 10 years. Okay, so it's about $1.4 trillion over a 10-year period. 4 titles, that 4 entities or titles they call it, get 99% of the funding. So the most funding goes to nutrition, the nutrition title that helps feed everyone around the country that needs assistance. And that's close to 85% of the total. The next one is the commodity program, those that protect our commodities prices a little bit, and also funds the Foreign Ag Service that helps USDA and other agencies help us market and protect our ability to market around the world. So that's 7%. Conservation is 7%. And crop insurance is 9%. So the incentives that allow farmers to better afford crop insurance is about 9% of the total. So anyway, food and nutrition close to 83%, crop insurance 9%, commodities 7%, and conservation 7%, and all the other ones, credit and rural development and research and forestry and energy and horticulture, all come in at about 1% total.
So the Farm Bill, big chunk of that is a nutrition program.
Yeah, 80-some% of it is, and it's been for a long, long time.
So, any thoughts on the Farm Bill from your perspective?
Well, we're we're going, I guess it's almost 100% that we're going to need to get an extension here before the end of the year. So the House and Senate is going to have to come together to extend the 2018 Farm Bill. By the way, we've been extending that already once this year, but 2012, I was co-chair of the American Soybean Association Farm Bill team. And we were supposed to have a 2012 Farm Bill done, and it didn't get done until January of 2014.
Okay.
And by the way, the chairman of our committee we term off the board in 9 years, and he turned off the board. And then in 2024, I was American Soybean Association president and chairman of the policy. And you know what? I got all the credit for that. So
Okay. All right.
I I gave him
Of
accolades
course.
because he did a lot of work on it, and spent 3.5 years on it. But all these take time, and particularly in this environment of oh boy, we are so marginalized in the middle, and we allow the people on either end of the spectrum to control the message, and we need to do a better job of that.
Not having a farm bill, how does that impact decision making by farmers?
It impacts it somewhat because most people think that we need to have a little bit higher reference prices. Other than that, immediately for agriculture, it's really about, are we going to be protected? Are we going to have some help with conservation programs? Are we going to have help with affording our crop insurance? Otherwise, it would cost at least 3 times as much to the farmer if the federal government wasn't helping. And will we have our federal government through the Foreign Ag Service and USDA, other agencies, will we have them help us and protect us from countries that put up trade barriers that don't allow us to market our products to them, and that's where, the trade piece is USDA. It's really important that our federal government, that we had the backing of our federal government when we do trade, because I've seen too many times major importers will put restrictions on, and they're called non-tariff barriers. They won't approve a new product or something like that, so it keeps you out of their market. So it's been fun, and I worked on regulatory issues a lot at the American Soybean Association. That is probably my main focus, actually.
So if I'm a farmer, I've never done cover crop, maybe I'm a landlord, and I want to work with my tenant to add more soil health to the farming operation. How do I get started with this? What's the first step of getting going to making this happen?
Make up your mind that you want to try it and give it a fair test. That's first.
Okay.
Secondly, don't jump in on every acre. Try a small area that maybe in the back somewhere, if you don't want your neighbors to see what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Don't want to make a mistake out along Interstate 80 or whatever, but try a little bit and give it a fair test, and then test it again the next year and the next year. And then, I think you're going to find out in most cases that, if you're open-minded and a little bit innovative about how you do it, that you can make that work. And at the same time, there's some incentives out there to offset some of your experience costs. That's what I call them, the cost of experience. Until you learn how to make it work, there's some incentives there that can pretty much offset your outlays.
Thinking of the Foreign Agriculture Services and Trade, there's a question just been raised. Is the reason foreign countries don't want to buy our food because of pesticides that we use and they don't?
No, that's not ever it at all. Sometimes they have used that against us, but they're those kind of practices, those kind of non-tariff barriers have not stood up in the court or and have not stood up in the long-term needs that they have, and to keep us out. It's been a GMO issue in the past. That's pretty much gone away today. It's been about some of the new technologies, the CRISPR. That's what I couldn't think of a while ago.
Okay. CRISPR. Yep.
Is more acceptable than the way we were doing, manipulating the seeds before. But overall, sometimes they just want to place an order and then cancel on you and drive the cost down. I've seen that happen a lot. So it's a marketing issue. Sometimes in Europe, they have been very opposed to GMOs, but they can use our GMO seeds, corn, soybeans, for animals, but not for human consumption.
Okay.
Wheat is not a GMO. There's a little bit out there, but it's not widely grown at all. So there's so many. When you see a label on a package, it says not GMO, like potatoes or rice or peanuts or a bunch of those products. They're not any GMOs at all in them. They're not genetically modified. It's just a sales gimmick in a lot of cases. But corn and soybeans are highly, highly traded. I agree with that. But because of that, we've been able to use less pesticides, protect our soil, clean our water, grow more crops at the same time to feed everyone.
Yeah, and feeding more people.
Yeah.
A question raised here is, why is organic no-till so difficult? And I'm assuming that means organic, they're not using herbicides. Can I assume that in that question?
Yeah, they would not be. And, the best, I've watched a little of it. We do not do organics. I think for some markets it's great. I think rye is a cover crop and plant it thick then, and get that mat out there that I don't want,
Right.
And then use a something to knock it down flat.
A crimper of some type?
Or a live disking or something. Don't disturb the soil and plant into that. It's the weed control is the reason they have to till, because it takes several passes with the cultivator because the weeds want to keep growing all summer long. That's what Mother Nature does. So it's that's the reason for tillage, I think.
So here's an interesting statement. This person says it's not a question, just interesting information. And this is in quotations from Purdue University. It reads like this: regenerative agriculture is seen as a climate solution and supplemental income source for farmers. Farmers would have to receive an additional $40 per acre in profit to switch from conventional tillage to no-till. Study seems to suggest more incentive needed to make it a widespread practice.
Wow.
That's how Purdue.
Yeah, and I think it depends on where you're at. If you're in really heavy soil, a lot of folks think that they need to till it up. I don't know. We don't have really heavy soil here. So that could be part of it. But everything I've seen, if you no-till, your cost of production goes down. Your input costs, your equipment costs, your fuel, your labor, all that goes down instead of up. Everything that I've ever experienced and seen in any kind of research, unless it's maybe the very heavy soils.
Just an interesting comment. The person who posted that, would you mind citing the resource for that? I would love to read that study myself. So if you could cite that, that'd be fantastic.
The other
Go ahead.
thing, and what we always say is solution to the land is that every farm is different.
Yeah.
Situation is different. So one size fits all. No-till and cover crops isn't the answer for everyone, but it can be an answer for a lot of folks. And it's really about encouraging, innovating, and adapting to the conditions that you have.
Iowa State University has developed the prairie strips. I'm understanding it's being adopted by surrounding states as an alternative, perhaps, to cover crops because they get paid CRP rates for that, conservation reserve rates. Any thoughts on the prairie strips that we're seeing in some parts of Iowa?
Yeah, I think in central Iowa they're proving it to be pretty successful in protecting the soil and reducing erosion and improving yields at the same time. Um, I haven't seen any in our area. We looked at it, and for our farm, I'm not saying we won't in the future, but we like that cover on every acre that we have, because most of ours is, they call it highly erodible, but it's erodible without those practices. And with our cover crops and no-till, we're not eroding at all. So every farm is different, and think about
Exactly.
what you have and adapt to those conditions.
Okay, here's a question, and there are no dumb questions. Why do farmers till? Is it the weeds? Is it bringing nutrients up for the next crop? Why the practice? I'm sure talking about conventional tillage.
Yeah, yeah. Part of it's, my friends in central and northern Iowa, they have colder soils, and you get up into Minnesota where you live and the Dakotas, soil is colder. And they believe that turning that soil black allows it to warm up better in the spring and allows them to plant a little earlier, which is usually a good thing. And they're incorporating the residue from the surface and allowing it to break down more quickly. And they're also incorporating their fertilizer at their tillage depths. They're, somewhere in between. So those are the reasons that I hear for them. Some of my friends in the Minnesota-Iowa border are using strip till and finding, they're using less fuel, less labor, less equipment, just tilling a strip and fertilizing into that every year, and they're finding some success and economies for input costs in doing that. So it's another opportunity, another option.
What I find interesting is it is the merger of new technology, because strip tilling wouldn't be possible without GPS,
right,
and computerization. Yep. All your machines are computerized now. Everything's in sync. A lot of this would not be possible without that new technology.
No.
Ray, you have shown us so much tonight, and you've lived this out for so many years, but you've not kept it to yourself. You are serving. We believe in loving God and loving neighbor, and you're doing that through your service as a leader in the ag field, and we thank you for that, Ray. We appreciate that so very, very much. Again, any lasting questions from anybody before we have our closing prayer? Ray, any last words of wisdom from you? Well,
I just think, like most farmers, it's all I ever wanted to do since I can remember. Farming is all I ever wanted to do. I think I've been blessed to be able to do that, and it was what I was meant to do. I've got to do some extraordinary things, that a lot of people don't get to do, because I volunteered and I tried to make a difference in this world. And I think I hope it's a great example for our next generation.
It is and has been. So thank you for that. Showing us how, again, to love God and to love our neighbor. My friends, I'm going to close this with prayer and going to another Thanksgiving hymn. The first one I read lyrics from was written in the mid-1800s. This was a little more contemporary. It's a hymn written in 1976. The title is "Come, Sing a Song of Harvest." Let's use these lyrics as our prayer. Let us pray. Come, sing a song of harvest, of thanks for daily food, to offer God the first fruits, is old as gratitude. Shall we sometimes, forgetful of where creation starts, view science as our savior, lose wonder from our hearts? May God, the great creator, to whom all life belongs, accept these gifts we offer, our service and our songs. The least the world go hungry, while we ourselves are fed, make each of us more ready to share our daily bread. And all of God's people said,
Amen.